Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of Sit, Zip, and Synapse. I am so happy to have a colleague of mine, Ariane Bergeron. She's actually a second year medical student with me at McGill, so cohort 2023, and she's here to talk about mental health and medicine, specifically ADHD and generalized anxiety disorder. Thank you so much, Ariane, for being here with me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So I was thinking we can kickstart this conversation, similar to how we did episode one, and just introduce the topic of ADHD and generalized anxiety disorder. And if you're comfortable speaking about it, maybe how they overlap, how they intersect, and like the influence they have on each other.
Yes, of course. So I'm gonna try to keep it simple, and I want to apologize for my English. Might not make sense at some point. I'm sorry. So basically, both disorders are a lack of neurotransmitters somewhere in the brain. So you're missing these little messengers come and goes in your brain, telling you what you need to do. So for ADHD, it's mostly a lack of norepinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. And what these three do, they have two main functions, which is organization and self-regulation. And I'm going to touch on like how all of this goes into my daily life later. And the hallmark of ADHD is really an impaired executive function. So when you have to analyze the information, prioritize, like filter everything in your head, and that applies in a lot of spheres of your life. So mood, attention, regulating your emotions, you're getting motivation, social behavior, sleep, memory, and so forth and on. So if I can like summarize ADHD, basically everyone is like a filter in your head that's telling you, if you think of doing something, the filter is like, no, don't say that, don't do that, or that information is not important, you do not need to focus on it, like on this. But with ADHD, that filter is not working. So basically you don't get that thing in your head that's like, don't do that, or like, that squirrel out there is not important, do not focus on it. So it's just hard to focus on important information and everything. um so what does it mean like for me to live with that? So first of all, it's really hard for me to stay focused on anything, especially if I'm not interested. Like there's no way I can listen. I cannot do only one thing like at a time. I cannot just listen to TV. I have to like play on my phone, or I cannot just listen to a class. I have to look up things online. I'm just unable to do that. um Also, it's hard to complete tasks because I'm going to go and, oh, I'm going to start doing this. And then midway through, I'm like, oh, I could do this too. So I just leave and leave it like half done. And then I come back. I'm like, why is it half done? Like, what's going on here? And it's like often like that. Or just like, I mean, everyone has had that feeling where you go into a room and you're like, why am I here? What did I want to come and get in this room? But like it happens sometimes, but with ADHD is like 50 times a day. You get everywhere, you open the fridge and you're like, what did I want to do? Or you're looking for a fork and you open the fridge and you're like, why am I looking in the fridge for a fork? So that's some of the things. Also, organization, motivation. Sometimes just like I want to do things. Like I know I need to do things, but if I have to do, for say, like homeworks and it's really important, I mean, and usually I would not do cleaning in my apartment, but if I have to do homework, you can guess I'm going to do that cleaning instead. Like I am not going to do that homework. I'm going to find anything else that I could do so I could still feel productive, but I'm going to avoid doing what I have to do. Another big part, and I people that know me know it, it's really hard for me to control first my emotions and like what I say, what I do. I have a lot of trouble with like social cues. um so sometimes I say things, I'm like, oh, why did I just, it just comes out and I'm like, oh. So I know when I was a kid, my mom would say in French like, tourne ta langue 7 fois dans ta bouche avant de parler, because it just like splurts out and I'm like, oh no. So that's a part, and one of the part I guess that's more taboo, and with some retrospective I see it because I was doing it more when I was younger, is all these risky behaviors. Because for those of you that know, dopamine is involved in like your what's the word I'm looking for, récompense,
Like pleasure
yeah,
seeking.
pleasure pathway and like everything. So if you have less dopamine, you need more stimulation to get that kind of feeling of like being satisfied. So I was before I was engaging in a lot of risky compulsive behaviors, such as like heavy drinking, risky sexual behavior, self-harming, um, overeating, like compulsive spending of money, just because I need to feel stimulated at all times. So that's a big part of ADHD. And yes, so overall, all of this, I think that one of the biggest thing is that this is super exhausting, because even when I'm not doing anything, like I could be sitting on a couch all day, but my head is spinning at 150 miles an hour at all time. So it's just exhausting. And even just doing like homework, it takes so much energy just to focus that, like, and at first I wouldn't, I couldn't understand. I was like, man, I didn't do anything. I was sitting in front of my computer and I feel like I've been training at a gym for 3 hours because I'm just like drained. But that's the part about ADHD, I guess. Yes. So now a bit about more about GAD. So generalized anxiety disorder. It's the same principle as ADHD and most, I guess, mental illnesses. It's again a problem with your neurotransmitters. So here also serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, but also GABA. Um, and basically generalized anxiety disorder is could be defined as you're worrying all the time. um but it's not, it's a persistent feeling that something like horrible is going to happen. You're apprehending everything and it's not justified. Like I could go on and like, oh my god, I could get hit by a car, someone's going to abduct me, and I'm like, come on, Ariane, like you're walking that street every day, nothing ever happened, but I'm still thinking about it. And when I go to bed, I'm like, oh my god, like I said that 3 months ago, what are they thinking of me now? Or I met this person yesterday, they probably hated me. And like, and it's just always like that, really apprehending the future and also always thinking back on the past. So it's kind of hard because it's, yeah, it's just not easy. And then your social interactions, something that's big for me. I know that I have a lot of like social anxiety as well. So going out, I'm always scared. And how I used to palliate for that was I would get drunk before I would go out. So this way I would not be scared. Because if I go out in a bar, I'm like, oh my God, what if no one talks to me? What if I'm alone in a corner? If I could summarize God, it would be like, what if? Um, and so, yeah, sometimes it's just like so hard to get out of bed because I'm like, so many bad things could happen today. And just sitting doing my lectures and starting crying because I'm like, oh my god, I don't understand that tiny concepts. What if I fail the exam? What if I fail med school? What if I don't become a doctor? What if? And it's just a circle that never stops. So yeah, I guess when you put ADHD, which makes it hard to be motivated and do things, plus God, which is making me worried because I don't do things, it's kind of a bad mix because it's just like I don't do things, so I get more worried. So I do less things because I'm worried and it never ends. So I think that's how I would summarize these two.
Honestly, thank you. Thank you for such personal stories. I think it just adds like already the stories you shared are just so deep, and like I honestly am, I just all I can say is thank you. Um, so we can see, like, obviously from your stories we can see that it was like something that really affected you profoundly for years. Like, how long have you been living with this, if I can ask?
Yes, so I was diagnosed with ADHD at the age of 14, but honestly, I think like I've been living with it for longer. The thing is, when I was in elementary school, the rationale was you're too good at school to have ADHD. That's what my parents were saying. So I've been diagnosed only at 14. And GAD, I had my official diagnosis at 19 and I'm now 21. But we knew it before. Like we knew I had some kind of anxiety disorder, but we thought it was mostly performance anxiety because like in high school, if I didn't get 90%, I would like cry and go and like have panic attacks because I thought like my life would end there. So yeah, but like the diagnosis, and I started medication at 14 for ADHD and 19 for GAD. So
So like you explained that it has a lot of impact on, like just functioning, like a lot of things you need to be able to do a lot of basic things in life. So how do you find, and I guess maybe it goes into like the medication, the treatment you got for it, but how do you feel like you've adapted, and like, do you find yourself like you learn skills to get better at it? Maybe just going into that a bit.
mhm. So I think like before I go into this, I think it's important for me to specify, because when we talk about ADHD, there's kind of different levels of diagnosis, either in terms of severity, which I have like severe ADHD, but I'm also in the class of what we call double exceptional, which is like uh, ADHD but with high IQ.
Mhm.
So this is why I feel like most people are like, oh, you can't have anything. Like you're good, like you're functioning well, because I am. And even if I don't take my medications, I can still function, which is not the case for everyone who has ADHD. But I guess medication has been a big part of helping me, especially when I was younger, to control my impulses and like help me organize and everything. But I had to develop some like skills. For me, a routine has been really helpful, because if I don't like have my routine, I feel like disoriented. I'm not sure what I want to do. And also, like, if I have to go to the hospital like on Monday, well, Sunday night, I'm going to prepare everything. My bag's going to be ready, because that takes out a lot of the stress of forgetting things, because I do. And then I get stressed because of the anxiety. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot that. So, and the more stressed I am, the more like symptomatic I become. Like, it's the same thing when people tell me, well, stop shaking your legs, because I'm always shaking my legs. And then I'm only focusing on my legs. So I just keep like having more tics and being more annoying. So yeah, I've done that. Personally, I know that a big part of the treatment for GAD and even ADHD is psychotherapy. Unfortunately, I didn't do that. I didn't have doctors that really like oriented me towards that, and I just never had the time, because parts of me having like ADHD and needing to do things, I'm like working 3 jobs, and I'm always doing something, just finding excuses not to have to go to therapy, But yeah, I find like making lists is super helpful. Making like having an agenda, saying everything I need to do to kind of force me to do things. Um, and one of the thing is accepting it. I feel has really helped me, because some days I wake up and I know I'm in a mood and I'm like, everything is crap. I just want to cry. I want to stay in bed. And at first, I was kind of forcing me, because especially in med school, there's this feeling that if you're not studying all the time, you're not doing what you should be doing. And I mean, I think any med student could relate to that. Like you feel you're always going to get behind. And at first, I would force me to try to study, and I would just sit in front of my computer with a blank stare, and I would start crying, and I would just try to do my lectures and cry. And I realized like it's fine. When these days happen, I just stay in bed, don't force myself to do things. And then it's better, because if I force myself to do things, I'm going to feel like crap for like 5 days and I'm not going to be productive at all. So I think it's like accepting that you have a disorder and like accepting to live with it is a big part. And I know it takes time. Like, I mean, I've had my diagnosis for a long time. So, but yeah.
After all these years, would you say like you finally reached the point? I don't even know if this is possible. To be honest, it's more of just like a random question I had. Like, do you think you've come to the point of like acceptance of your diagnosis? Or do you feel like you have work to do and there will always be work to do, but you're just taking one step forward towards that acceptance?
Yeah, no, I do think I have reached that acceptance. I feel especially for my anxiety disorder, because at first, especially in Cégep, I was like, huh, I don't need meds. I'm strong enough. I can do it without meds. And I was like, and I feel bad for thinking that. I was like, I'm stronger if I don't take meds, which is so not true. And I mean, I am now taking meds and it helped me so much. I mean, before when I would have like panic attacks, it would last like 4 hours. I would just cry for 4 hours. Now with my meds, I have them so less often and it lasts like 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay, I'm over it. Let's do something else. So I feel I always will have some work to do. It's just on different aspects. So for especially for ADHD, when I was younger, it was really my impulsivity, like not getting mad and not getting super angry at things. And now I feel it's more like the social aspects, like reading the room. I'm trying to work on that, trying to work on like saying the right thing at the right moment, not just like shouting answers. And yeah, but I've accepted it, but I'm gonna have to work on myself for all my life, because like on this, and that's fine. I mean,
I mean, I'm so happy you came to you find yourself at a point of where you're happy with yourself and you're accepted and you're working towards it. I think it takes so much courage and so much work to even be able to reach that point. And I'm honestly like truly happy for you.
thank you.
So I was like wondering, in terms of like you had mentioned that like your doctors didn't bring up psychotherapy and there's a whole journey. So it's clear that you've had your course of visits with the doctor and whatnot. Do you feel like the diagnosis was easy to get to? Because mental illness has a stigma and it's often harder to get diagnosed with, I personally find. So do you feel like it was not an easy process, but just that your doctors believed you, and then after believing you, it was an easier process to get like referrals to things, and maybe even talking about, you said the stigma related to the medication. So
Yeah, that's a big aspect, and I think we need to work a lot on it as healthcare professionals because it's been kind of a weird road, I'd say. So it started with my diagnosis of ADHD. So at the time, and when I was 14, I was a really difficult child, well, teenager, whatever. Um, at school, at home, it was really hard, and at that time, I got diagnosed. The thing is, I had lived in like centre de répit, so basically to give a break to my parents for the summer. Um, and during the fall, I went back home, and at one point, I got in a fight with my parents, and I just shouted like, and I didn't believe it, but I was like, I'm gonna kill myself. And because I just wanted to go back to the center because it was kind of a vacation for me. Like, I mean, I didn't have to deal with my parents. So my parents were like, okay, that's enough. You're not going to go back there every time something bad happens. So they're like, okay, you say you want to kill yourself? Well, then we're going to call the police. And that was kind of a last, like, my mom was at the end of the road. She didn't know what to do. And that's the only way she found to see a psychiatrist, because pedo psychiatrists especially are super hard to see, to get appointments with. Like, there's a waiting list, like, super long. So I ended up in the ER, where I got to see the pedo psychiatrist. And I think, like, at the time I was not happy about it, of course, but like looking back, it was probably the best decision my parents made. um but the thing is, even if I got that kind of meeting with her, it was a 30 minutes like appointment. I didn't know her. She didn't know me. She was like, okay, so you have ADHD and you have a big impulsivity problem. We're going to put you on medication. That's it. I was like, okay, well, I mean, let's take the medication. So, and I think I had two follow-ups with that doctor, and she was just like to see if the medications were good. There was never like, she didn't do any psychotherapy. She didn't refer me to anyone. She just put me and dosed me on medication at the time. Um, Medications were great. Like, I mean, it's great when you fix a problem, but at the time I was on Vyvanse, and what it would do during the day, I would be a zombie. Like, I would have no emotions. I would just sit quietly at, like, in class. Of course, teachers were happy about it. I would not disturb anyone. But when I would go back home at the end of the day, it's as if when the medication were off, all the emotions I didn't have during the day were just like exploding. So I would be so explosive and so like unstable at home in the evening, and I couldn't sleep. So all of this just worsened the situation, I think, because I was not well controlled. I was just like dosed off on medication. And the problem with ADHD medications is one of the known side effects is to increase anxiety. So so I didn't have at the time the anxiety diagnosis, but it just made it worse with my performance anxiety. And so it's been a lot. I had a lot. Then I was referred to my pediatrician at the time. He was the one controlling my meds. And at first he was like, well, you didn't have a proper evaluation. You were just like, because for those of you that know, it's like a whole, like, you need to see a neuropsychologist or neuropsychiatrist. It's like hours and hours of tests to make a diagnosis. And it costs a lot because you need to go to the private sector. And so it's like, you just saw a doctor for 30 minutes and she diagnosed you. But I mean, I had enough of the signs and symptoms like ADHD, but the thing my pediatrician was like worried about is that I might have had other diagnoses, which was the case, which were not treated and just made everything worse in the end. But for a couple of years, I tried a lot of medications, and never was I like, my parents wanted me to see a psychologist, but the doctor never really pushed for it, which is weird because, as we learn, it's one of the mainstay of treatment in like mental illness is psychotherapy. But I have to say I was lucky because at school I was followed really closely by the TES, which we call in French like the special person who has a training like in, I don't know what it is in
yeah, I'm not
English.
sure what the English is, but I think like essentially like a support service at school. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a social worker, but at school. So I was followed really closely, and he's the one, honestly, that helped me the most. It was not psychotherapy, but it was as if, so I could go there when I didn't feel well. And when I felt I was about to explode. So over the years, that was my experience. And then I was switched to a family doctor. I have to say, I'm really lucky that I had this GP. She's really supportive. She's really understanding, and she had some additional training in psychiatry, so she knew what she was doing. And when my year like my transition from CEGEP to university is when I got my anxiety disorder diagnosis, because I went through a big adjustment disorder, which we wasn't sure if it was like depression, adjustment disorder. I was put on antidepressants, didn't work. And then when I started my med P year, I was like, okay, this is too much. And like a lot of things happened. I had to move to a different town, stop cadets, my grandpa died, like everything happened like at once. And in the morning, I could just not get out of bed. Like literally for days and days, I would just like cry in bed, stay in the dark. And then my doctor was like, okay, I think this is like, you have something more than ADHD. And she put me on the anxiety meds, which helped tremendously. Um, and she's really understanding, and she's really nice in the sense that she trusts me, like especially ADHD meds. We all know they're like controlled substances, so some doctors are like, you took one more than you should have, so you're probably a drug addict. And like there's a lot of judgment in that sense. But my doctor, like, she's like, you're a med student, I trust you. Like, and if I go and I'm like, I think we need to adjust them, I'd like a lower dose, a higher dose, she's like, okay, just tell me what you need, I'll prescribe it, I trust you. And I feel that's a big part for any patient, like that trust link. Because like, of course, like I don't want to say nobody's going to abuse these meds, because there's a potential to, and like it happens, but like not jumping to conclusion, like, and just assuming they're drug addicts, or even at the pharmacy. Because sometimes and I mean, I know it, I work as a pharmacy tech, and I know like some patients come 2 days in advance for their vitamins, and we're like, that's weird, like you're probably abusing it. But the thing is, we have life. Like sometimes you need to pick it up 2 days in advance. Like it happens. So yeah, I think it's hard to navigate. And I feel I'm lucky because I have like some medical knowledge. I know a bit more, like, and I feel comfortable asking for things I know I need. But I feel for any other patients that don't have that knowledge, like we need to do more, because they don't know what they need to ask for, they don't know what they can get as help. And I mean, of course, like, it's, for me, it's ridiculous that you have to pay to see a psychologist, when it's like some people can't afford that, but it would help them so much. So that's another topic.
Yeah, a whole nother topic. I absolutely agree. And it's honestly heartbreaking that you have to go through so much to get a diagnosis. And I think we have made strides, but we have a lot of work to do, especially with mental health. It's not like a heart attack you can see on ECG, right? It's brain activity that's altered, and it manifests so differently in so many people. And I think we just have so much work to do. And um, I hope we're working towards it, and I hope our generation of doctors see it more, because mental health is being centered, and we start to realize more and more how vital it is, and it always has been. It just never got the attention, right? So I hope
Yeah.
so. So I guess on a more unique point of view, in your sense, is that you are in medical school, and obviously we know, and I know how intense it can get, and like how the vibe of always have, like you said, we always have to do and know everything, and we always have to keep performing. And I feel like a sense of, I guess, hesitancy to be vulnerable and be open with like your struggles, and especially mental health struggles. Do you feel like your diagnosis um, impacted your med journey in like a unique way? Because I know you are open with your diagnosis and people know, which I find is super brave. But did you, like, what motivated you to like get to this point?
Yeah. So yes, you're right. I'm open about it, because I feel, well, first, I'm not saying it excuses when I have like behaviors that are just like impulsive and everything, but I think it helps people understand sometimes why I do things the way I do things, why I react this way. And I've always been open about it. But I have to admit, in Cégep, when I was because I've had accommodations since Cégep. I've had some in high school, because I had a diagnosis and I was allowed to get like accommodations, like more time and everything on my exam. But in high school, they took it away from me. They told me, your grades are too good, you don't need them. And I was like, wait, what? So they just like took away my accommodations. Like, other people don't have good grades, they need it. You don't, your grades are fine. So like,
Mm.
okay. Um, so in Cégep, I was a bit like hesitating to go get these like accommodation measures. But I mean, yes, it's like more time, but it's also doing my exams like in a more controlled environment. And I mean, honestly, I think for me, I think it's mostly I do it for others because when I'm like stressed and doing an exam, I move around a lot. Like I shake my leg, I play with everything, and I feel I'm really like annoying to other people. So then I stress more. So, and I mean, I wouldn't want to do an exam next to me. So I feel just putting me apart is a good thing for everyone. But in Cégep, I got a really good like person, and so I got my accommodations. And I asked her, I was like, I want to apply in medicine. Like, can they refuse me based on the fact that I have accommodations, and will I get them in university? And she was like, no, they're never gonna know. Like they cannot ask that, and they cannot refuse you based on that. So like, okay, fine, cool. And at the time, that's when I became like more open about my diagnosis, but I was getting a lot of bad like reactions. Like people were telling me that because I was taking like Adderall, that I was basically cheating. And that's people that were some of my friends that also wanted to apply to medicine, and they basically were telling it's not fair because you have an advantage over me for applying to medicine because you get better grades thanks to your meds. And I was like, well, I can't read on the board, so I get glasses. And I think that's one of the big misconceptions because we know a lot of people abuse of these drugs. And I know, like, we know it's a thing in med school. People like get Adderall on the black market because they want to focus. But I mean, we're not all equal. My brain starts there because I'm lacking these neurotransmitters. So when I take my meds, I just get to the same level and I'm allowing my brain to perform that 100%. Whereas if you were taking them and you don't have ADHD, your brain's working 150%. So you're like super performing. So that wouldn't be fair. And I mean, I have never like taken like my Adderall at night so I could study all night. Like I would fall asleep anyways. I'm so exhausted, I would fall asleep. But I know some people do. And so I understand where people are coming from when they get these worries. Um, but yeah, I would get all these comments. Even a teacher, we were discussing it, was like, yeah, these meds are cheating and like people should not take them. I was like, what is your problem?
Oh my
So
God.
that's one of the like when I that made me hesitant to like disclose it because I was like, and people, yeah, people would come to me, oh, can I get some Adderall for my party? And I was like,
Oh
what the
my
heck?
goodness.
Like, honestly, there's so many, like, yes, Adderall's like helps me a lot, like, but there's so many side effects that people never talk about. So honestly, when I don't need it, I don't take it. Like, I don't take it every day. Like, if I'm just hanging out, like chilling out outside, like, I don't need to be focused. That's fine for me if I get distracted by the squirrel. So I don't take it. And again, some people use that and say, well, you don't need it then if you don't have to take it every day. I'm like, okay. So there's a lot of, and I mean, I got these reactions from colleagues in med school too. So, and I mean, yes, it hurts me, but I'm trying to put myself in their place. Like, it's such a stressful environment, it's so competitive that I could see that maybe I would react the same way if it was not like if it weren't me and someone else. So I see where they're coming from for sure. Um, but yeah, that's one of the obstacle I came through. And for I remember first year of med school, um, I was talking with someone. I was like, yeah, I mean, I have 50% extra time for my exams. And full disclosure, I think I never took it. Like it's just having it there because sometimes I mean just it's just putting my thoughts together. So in med school, because of like multiple choice, it doesn't really apply. But if you need to make me write a text, like, oh my god, it's long because I'm always like, oh my god, I need to erase because I want to have that. And like writing a 500 words like text, no, I would put 3,000. And the teachers would be like, oh my god, can you stop doing that? Just because it's a part I was talking earlier. Like I cannot filter what's important and what's not. Like when I'm trying to do like an exam or something. So I'm like, I'm gonna put everything I know. So this way I'm sure I'm gonna get what they're looking for. So that's why I have the extra time and like for revision because I make a lot of mistakes. Like most of the mistakes I get on my exam, I'm like, oh my God, what the heck? Like I knew that. It's just like I didn't read all the like I didn't read it all. So I just like, okay, I put that answer in. So, and someone told me like, well, yeah, you get extra time, but you won't get extra time with your patients. How are you going to do in clerkship? I'm like,
Oh
and
no.
and I mean, you know, it's not the same thing. Like, and actually, I'm way more performant, like in the like clinical environment, like that's where I shine, and I'm like super good, and like I think about everything we need, like, but doing an exam, like sitting there and just focusing, trying to read something on a computer, that's what's hard for me. So more people were telling me that, I was like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna let that slide, and yeah, that's what like medicine's been like. And just to I have another like anecdote. I'm sorry, I'm going on and on,
No, I love to
but
hear it. I'm sure everyone listening does too. So please take all the time you need.
and I remember in my med P year, we had like what we call the thank you party, and the week before I was started on my anxiolytic medication, so for my GAD, and my mom told me like, be careful with drinking. When I was taking these meds, I would like black out, and I was like, I'm a heavy drinker. Like I've always been a heavy drinker. I'm gonna be fine. And I got to that party, and an hour and a half later, I was in the ambulance. And it never happened to me. And like, I know some people are like, oh, that's cool. Like, we're leaving an ambulance. Like, we got more ambulance than you did at your party. But honestly, when I got into medicine, I was like, oh my God, are you like, what the heck? We're future doctors, and you find it cool that people leave an ambulance? Like, that was like the worst thing for me. Like when I woke up the next day, I was like apologizing to like the group that's like, oh my God, guys, like this was the worst thing for me. And people were like, no, that's fun. We got an ambulance and the med ones didn't. And I was like, that's not something I'm proud of. But to come to the point, I got to the ER, and I don't remember much. But the only thing like that was going on in my drunk head was like, they need to know what meds I take, because like if ever they want to give me anything, they need to know the meds I'm on. So I kept repeating to anyone who would hear me, like, I take Adderall and Cipralex. Like, you need to know. And I just remember hearing, I don't know if it was a doctor or a nurse, but just saying like, oh yeah, all these med students like popping Adderall to perform more. And that like broke my heart. I was the next day, that's the like almost the only thing I remember from that night. And I was like, really? Like, okay, I'm dumb. I ended up in the ER because I drank too much. Like for me, I thought I was dumb. Like I was already like, but this, like for the Adderall, I was like, and I remember I was just like, no, I really need it. Like I have like a diagnosis. I'm not like taking it like somewhere like weird and just popping them to like. So that was something that just like marked me. Like, and I mean, we hear it's not the worst thing. I mean, we hear worst thing in the news that like healthcare professionals say, but I'm like, that just brought home the fact that we need to be so careful with what we say as health professionals, because sometimes we think like patients are not listening, they're asleep, and even during rounds, like, oh, patients like they won't remember it, and we say things, but we need to be careful about what we say, because people can really feel hurt, and that can make them lose like any trust they have in the healthcare system. So I think
Yeah.
that's something important.
Ugh, I broke my heart. That made me so sad. Honestly, like, no, like it shouldn't be at a point where you have to defend yourself when you say you have a diagnosis, you take medication. Like, yeah, there are misconceptions. Yeah, there are stereotypes. Yeah, there are people that may take Adderall for it, but you shouldn't have to feel bad for having a condition that you take medication for that you need. And I think that's like, ugh, I hope everyone listening that's in a healthcare profession really takes like very key messages from this. Like there's so much we need to do, and we just need to be better. We need to be better for patients and for people like you that have to go through these unfortunate situations. This is so, so heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes, I mean, as I said, I work in a pharmacy, and I've been on some clinical rotations so far with TCP, and sometimes it's not about me, but people are talking about the patients, and like some patients like that have similar like background as I do, and I'm like, they're kind of bitching, oh, that patient, yeah, they're like mental illness, like blah blah, and I'm like, can we just stop? And I mean, I know some people have it harder than me. Like, I'm never gonna say I'm like having it super hard, and it's like, but I mean, I've been discriminated because of that. And I mean, I've been told, oh, you can't know what discrimination feels like. And I mean, people that know me, I'm in the army, like I'm a cadet instructor. And when I applied, when I got to the like medical exam, I mean, I had to disclose the meds I was on. So I just went and gave them the list. And then the person doing like the interview was a technicien médical, so they're not doctors, they're not nurses, it's just a like specific position in the army. And he was like, don't think you could get enlisted with like these meds. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, I'm super like, I function super well, I've been in the cadets, like, what's the problem? And then they refused to enlist me at first. They were like, with your ADHD, anxiety, and possible episodes of depression, we're scared you might be a danger for the cadets, for the kids. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I mean, I'm a medical student. Like, I work like 2, 3 jobs also. Like, I mean, if you just asked about me, you would see that I'm super high functioning. And again, I could see where they're coming from, because at the pharmacy, I would see patients who have the same medication list as me, and they're not functional at all. Like, and when I say non-functional, like they can't have a job. They're basically like functioning, living alone. And they basically have the same diagnosis as I do, but just different. Like, so I mean, I can get where they're coming from, but for me, the doctor never saw me. They just read like, oh yeah, she takes these meds. They're like, no, you're not fit to be enlisted. So obviously, we like went and contest that decision. They're like, okay, for your field of like, as a cadet instructor, you can. But if I had applied to any other field, they would have been like, no, you don't come into the army. And I was like, that really hurt me, honestly. That, I think that's the thing that hurt me the most with all my diagnosis, like everything I like live because of my diagnoses, because getting in the army was really important for me. It had a big like significance. And they were just like, no, basically you're crazy, we don't want you. And I was like, you don't know me. And that's, yeah, that's a big of stereotypes. And I mean, you've probably all medical students that feel like for disability insurance, they just ask you, do you have any mental illness? So, and I'm not saying any like anyone with any mental illness could be like functioning well and everything. Like, I'm not saying if you have schizophrenia, you're not functioning well. But I mean, you're putting me with my ADHD and anxiety that are well controlled, like with medication, in the same category as like someone who is in psychotic episodes or like delusional episodes most of the time. I don't want to say insulting, because I don't want to put these people down. Like, everyone goes, like, you don't choose to get mental illness. But for me, it's like, I don't think the risk is the same. Like, I mean, so I feel there's a lot of unknown. We're making progress, but I mean, I think there's a lot to do that people should get informed about mental illness.
Yeah, I feel like we often put people in boxes, and life doesn't work like that. You can't just shove people in a box of like criteria off of DSM-5 or whatever the book is called. That's not how simple life is, especially something as complex as mental health, where we haven't made, like, we just don't know enough. And we hopefully will get there, but we just don't know enough. So just be open to listening to people and their experiences, and you learn so much.
Yeah.
I guess I have my parting thoughts, I think would be beneficial for people, like especially people in our cohort that may be listening. What would you want future healthcare professionals, like how can we change care for mental health, or specifically for ADHD or generalized anxiety disorder, or anything? Like, how can we be better physicians, and how can we advocate? Like, how can we help make a change?
I'd say, and that's something that's really hard to do. Even I do it, but try not to judge. And I mean, we're always gonna judge. But try to like, if you judge, and that's okay, try to like ask yourselves, why are you thinking that? And I mean, mental illness is such a like complicated like category of illnesses that if you're, for example, like a family doc, don't, as I feel, I would say, don't hesitate to refer to people who are more well equipped than you to deal with it, because you're not doing someone with mental illness any favor by just like, okay, I'm going to prescribe you some meds and be on your way, because that's not the only way to treat mental illness. Like, one part is a med, but a big part is like therapy and like finding ways to adapt. So yes, I think that's really what, like, be careful the way you talk, the way you, I mean, obviously some patients will come and you'll be like, you'll see them, you'll be like, oh my God, no, not that patient, or oh, not them again. Like, really get your crap together. I mean, and yes, like, that might be the case. And I mean, but try to put yourself in them shoes. Don't assume you know what they're feeling, because being neurodivergent, like, we're not seeing the world the same way. We're not. And like, I like conclude by saying, like, I apologize in advance. Like, I'm sorry. Try, like, for what I do, for what I say. I know I'm working on it very hard, and it's not easy, but please don't hold a grudge against us, people, and ask us. I mean, well, maybe not everyone, but I prefer someone asking me like, why do you say that, or why do you do that? than just like assuming I'm a bad person, because I know I can be annoying. I'm sorry. Like I know I'm like just all over the place and I talk when I shouldn't. I interrupt people and like I'm sorry about it. But tell us, don't be afraid. Just be respectful, I guess. That would sum it up. Be respectful.
Honestly, thank you so much for this powerful interview. Like I got goosebumps at so many points, and so incredible. And I really hope everyone listening, and especially people we specifically in our cohort and healthcare professionals that are listening to this, really take home like really key messages. You know, just be respectful and be open to the idea that every patient has their experience and every person has their experience beyond just being a patient. So thank you again.
You're welcome. That was great. Thank you.